Hello, welcome back to another episode of Garrison Talks. I've got with me both Tyler and Matt. With me, how you
Woohoo!
guys doing?
I'm
Doing
doing
great.
good.
Like, yeah, we got the little teaser of Matt like 2 weeks ago, and then now we had Tyler last week, and now we've got both of them. We finally got to get band back together, so
The
it's gonna be a
band's all
good time.
here.
All right. Yeah. So tonight we'll talk a little bit about like threat evaluation, your flight and flight mechanic, when it pertains to Legion. Go a little bit into how to like reflecting on games, like kind of like post game reflection and improvement, like what to learn, what to take away from games besides the dice being bad. And then we'll probably talk a little bit about either upcoming tournaments, a little bit about hobby. We'll figure it out when we get there. Cross that bridge when we come to it. Yeah. All right. Before we get into threat evaluation, really quick, as a reminder, Indie Open is coming up on June 7th and 8th or
7th
8th
and
and 9th.
8th.
All right, I can remember.
7th and 8th.
Yeah. Friday, Saturday tournament for all you religious folks out there.
Or non. That's
Or
okay too.
non-religious folks. No, we don't discriminate here.
Yeah.
You-
we
It
accept
just
all.
so happens. I was like, it just so happens that the churches have big gymnasiums, so it works out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of great. We get the venue for pretty much free. They love having us there. They've actually like 3 days after we did the event last year, they were like, "Are you guys coming back next year? Like we want to do this again." And I was like, "Oh, well, like I assume we'd be driven out with, pitchforks and torches and they were so excited to have us there. They've been talking about it for the last 12 months. They just thought it was so cool. So it's a great venue. We're hoping to get up to 80. That's pretty ambitious.
Yeah.
My goal is just to outdo Rocky Top. Looking at you, Brian Salowski. So,
Hey, we're actually hosting this in the Church of Bistan. So
that's right. There you go.
Forgot about that. Yeah. All right, but yeah, so that's coming up. Always fun to look out for, and it's always. Do you think like I'm asking you now because like I'm just thinking about it. Fees are probably going to be about the same because we get it for cheap and we can just put it all back in prize support.
Yeah, so I think last year the price was 25. I'm looking at $30 this year, so it's roughly the same. I think the increase in 30 was mostly just to help cover some of the additional prize support and just get us over that hump. Especially because of the streaming and all of that. So making sure we have good setup and all of that. So
and it's still like so much cheaper than like Gen Con and stuff. It's great.
yeah. You're talking $174 or whatever it is just for your badge, and then you've got the event price, and so yes,
Yeah.
much cheaper than Gen Con.
So you always got that to look forward to. But with that out of the way, I think we can move straight into threat evaluation. So Matt kind of brought this topic up and was kind of like messaging me about it. So like I'm gonna let Matt kind of take it away at the start for saying like, what do you mean by like threat evaluation and like this like fight or flight mechanic kind of deal when it pertains to Legion?
Yeah, so I think in terms of Legion, and Tyler might be able to speak into this a little bit too. One of the things that I think about in terms of Legion is, I mean, you have ranged units and you have melee units, specifically with your character units. You know, Bosk is going to be your ranged hunter. Vader is going to be more of your melee. He wants to come in and smash through things. And so the real question is, can these units hit above their weight class? And what's the threat evaluation where, Vader might be able to swing through 200 points just by himself, wiping out units. And so when you see a Vader coming in, and so if you see an operative Vader coming in on you and he's charging straight for, your veteran squad or your clone unit, what's the threat evaluation in that moment? And do you need to start pulling that unit back as a flight, or do they need to go in and fight? And so the question is kind of in key moments, and we don't have to talk about every character because otherwise we'd be here all night. But how does a newer player figure out those moments to be able to identify when they need to push in and when they need to run away?
See, I know how I would recommend figuring it out, but it's also probably like the worst way to go about it.
Hey.
And, the most fun way, at the very least. Full W key. Figure out your limits each game. Like something might die
Just
very,
charge
very
everything in
quickly.
all the time.
Yeah, it might die very, very quickly, but like you'll figure out how much damage you can do with that unit very quickly.
Yeah, I think I have an interesting way to think about this, and it's kind of like, man, it's weird to explain. Like it works well in my head, but I'll see how this comes out.
Yeah.
So the points that a unit costs, and the value that comes with that is kind of like a currency in a weird way. So it's kind of like, how do I spend my a good example I found is my Geonosian unit is 71 points for the pike and the extra body. If they are able to put on so much pressure up a flank, or they're able to threaten a middle box grab, or their triple move enables them to go score a corner breakthrough, like are they getting their 71 points worth out? And for them, like almost all the time, it's yes. They're like throwing more than enough dice. They're doing the objectives really well and stuff like that. And sure, they'll die if they get shot, but you know, so will everything else in CIS. So, um, meanwhile, you take a unit like, I feel like Dooku is a good example. It's staying in CIS. I mean, that's what I know best. And he doesn't, I think, ever really get his like 220-ish points of value out quite the same as like a Vader does, even though they might be competitively valued with each other. Just because he doesn't throw as many dice, his cards aren't as killy in terms of like, I'm going to activate twice, or I'm going to like throw this unit, do auto wounds, and do other various things like that.
Look at you,
And
Vader.
and you see Dooku's, you see the community like kind of collectively agree that he's not like super, super, I don't know, competitive, I guess. Even though he's still good, but he's not as competitive as other things in the faction. So I think that's a good way of looking at it, is just like, you gotta look at what you're spending for them, and you gotta ask yourself, are you gonna get that many points out of that unit?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think that's partly too why you hear it in so many community podcasts. You hear it when we're talking about it. We have this meta discussion. Part of it is it's not because everyone's obsessed with finding the right meta list. It's mostly because so many Legion players are trying to find the most efficient point currency. What is the unit that can just spend it? Because like Dooku, like you said, is a good unit. He just doesn't have the type of efficiency for that cost like an operative Vader would in another faction or so. And so they, most players want to be conservative and just spend those points elsewhere. So I think that's a good point. And so for me, I tend to think about it that a little bit in those terms too. Like I play Rebels. So like Sabine is one of the higher cost Rebel units, but like Sabine's never going to like collect her weight and kills. Like that's just not her role. That's not where she gets her efficiency. It's more about biding time and tying up units and throwing explosions. And so hers is kind of a weird threat evaluation for me of like, she wants to bounce around. She never wants to really be tied up. And so how do I evaluate when she's going to, because there's going to be some games where she earns that 156 points, and there's some games where she's going to be just under it or way under it. And so how do I make sure that I'm getting the most value out of her?
156
For sure.
points?
Well,
With a Dark
with the Dark
Saber.
Saber and other stuff.
Well,
Yeah.
no, I was like, I'm just saying, like, I'm good with numbers, and it's like paired supplies, grappling line, Dark Saber, and like situational awareness is 154, not 156. Just saying.
Sorry.
Actually, it's 154.
Actually, yeah. But anyway, all right. So, I want to talk more about the characters, but like really quickly, just for like this evaluation of your own units, for like core units and like special forces and all that, like the non-character stuff. How are you like just quickly like kind of like evaluating like how much a unit needs to do? Like just in general, like because it's like have to do more than others because it's like, but like they're also like the same cost kind of things. Like fleet troopers and Ewoks, for example, for rebels, like have vastly different like levels of value, I think. But like
Yeah.
they are the same points cost. So like, how do you evaluate what a unit has to do to get its points worth?
Absolutely. I think that's kind of one of the harder things, and that's why I see this mostly in a lot of people who are getting into the hobby, even people who like played other war games and jumping into Legion. The hardest thing is understanding a unit's role. Like, I mean, you look at a Dooku, you would think Dooku is just going to be able to wipe the floor with just about anybody and run up there, and he mostly can. It's just understanding that his role is more of a ranged attacker, and because he doesn't have the charge, he only has the relentless on the 1 pip, and so he's not going to be able to just drive up the middle like an operative Vader or an operative Luke, or even an Anakin can. And so trying to learn what a unit's role is going to help lean to, okay, here's where I can get the most efficiency out of this unit. Like slingers. Slingers are great, but they're also really a 35-point unit that's going to be there to grab objectives, maybe throw a few shots. They're mostly there to annoy. And if they can do that, then they've done their job.
Slingers are fucking annoying. Okay, that's weird. All right. I hate slingers. I despise playing against slingers, so like I can attest to that. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I think you mentioned Rebel Troopers versus Fleet Troopers, and I think maybe this is just because I don't play Rebels all too much. But I don't know. I kind of see them having the same role, at least now. I feel like all they do is just really like you're going to run and grab objectives, and like I know Adam loves his XX or SX shotgun troopers with the captains and
and frag grenades
and frags, and it's a cool unit, and they're super cheap for what you're getting. It's 64 points or something like that.
62. I'm good with numbers. I'm telling you, I'm not good at a lot of things, but I'm good with numbers.
But I mean, like you think about it, like that's a good example of you're paying 62 points for a full unit, the full 6-man unit with a heavy that like has some killing potential if you get close, but otherwise it's probably best just to run and like get some objectives and like maybe threaten a flank or something like that. Not necessarily be your focal point, but just to be there to kind of fill whatever role you need. And it's cheap enough at 62 points that you're kind of like, I can kind of do a little bit of everything and you don't feel too bad.
Yeah, to be fair, when I said Rebel Troopers and Fleet Troopers, it's literally because it was what was in front of me on my screen. Probably a better example is like Mandalorian Resistance versus like Strike Team.
Well, and I think the better example is even just going a further step up, Rebel Troopers and Rebel Veterans. There's a huge difference in their role. I mean, you put the heavy gun on a veteran squad, that unit does not want to be... I mean, it can grab boxes, sure, but that's not its job anymore. It wants to be shooting.
Absolutely. I was going to say B1s and B2s is the other example.
Right.
Like, they, obviously at their core, like, it's a core unit. You kind of want them to be playing the objective game in some sense or fashion. But B2s do not play anything like B1s. Like, with B2s, you get aggressive. With B1s, you're like, I'm just going to throw my little plink sniper shot at you and hide till the end of the game, and then, like, you're not going to kill enough bodies. So that's not B2s at all.
B2s are a real man's unit.
Charging
in. I'm not charging in. Just charging in, doing what they want. But, all right, I guess that's probably the best way to put it, is that, like, we said it a couple times, but, like, identifying the role of the unit is probably the most important part for threat evaluation, like you guys are saying.
Yeah, and that's hard. That's going to come with time. I think talking to other people in the community, really kind of figuring out, playing, understanding your units, is going to learn the role. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Adam.
It's fine. No, I won't remember that at all. Don't worry. It's as important to do it for your list though as it is to do it for your opponent's list, because like you have to like kind of like identify what their objective grabbing units are, what their killing units are, because that also goes a lot into evaluating what's a threat to you and like the current situation. So I think it's just important to see it on both sides.
Absolutely. Yeah, I that's actually really funny, because I was literally just telling Adam I was listening to last week's episode, and you and Tyler were talking about that, and how I mean, that's one of the things that Brian's list is always crafted to do is the puzzle box his opponent's got to figure out. So leaning into that, I'm rabbit trailing a little bit, but that's okay. Tyler, while you were at the WTC, like, was there any puzzle box list just from other players like that you guys, I mean, you're talking about players from across the globe. They clearly think and play differently than us. Or at least some of them do, I think. But was there any puzzle box list that you faced or that your team faced or saw that, you know?
I mean, thinking off the top of my head, I'm not quite sure. There were several very, very interesting lists. I mean, you can of course rope Ewoks in as kind of a puzzle box list a little bit, I think.
Yeah.
Because if you
For sure.
haven't seen them, they're gonna really surprise you with what they do and how they play. I mean, there's also like Black Sun buses. Like I played that and I lost to that. But I don't know if it's necessarily a puzzle box. It's just one of those like you kind of know what the list is doing turn 0,
Gotcha.
and it's whether you can mitigate it or not. There was one list that was on Team Germany, I think, and I'm just going off the top of my head. I think the guy's name was Yana. And it was again going off the top of my head. I think it was Grievous, Asajj, Bosk with 5 E5SB1s and a T series. And
That's a fun one.
yeah, it's only 9 activations, but it's every turn you have perfect order control, and you know, it's just Grievous, Asajj, and Bosk, like the 3 heroes that hit actually really, really hard.
Yeah.
So I kind of see that as a little bit of a puzzle box list.
I could see that for sure. Like, I mean, personally, if I had to face that, I don't necessarily know his game plan out of the gate. I mean, he's got a ton of command card options. Grievous wants to be close. Asajj wants to be close. Bosk doesn't. So now he's got options to kind of be flexible.
Yeah.
So,
And the list
yeah.
actually, I mean, you brought up command cards. It actually kind of works because you don't really want to take any of Grievous's cards except his 1-pip, and Bosk is the opposite.
Right.
You don't really want to take his 1-pip. So it's like match made in heaven right there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that's also probably a good example of like the easiest way to figure out what a list wants to do is trying to piece together what role a unit is playing in that list, right?
Yeah.
But to pull it back a little bit and to move on to like looking at kind of like your heroes and protecting your heroes when they should fight, when they should run like a coward. What's like the first thing you look for? Like for protect, look for like when a hero is in danger, if a hero is in danger, if you will.
I think the easiest thing for newest players is if they have a lightsaber and they're coming at you and you don't move back. I mean that's usually just the easy. I mean that's not always the case, but in general, like if you see a Vader coming into your Boba, or if you see an Anakin coming into your Callus or whatever it is, I mean that's not a fight that you're probably going to win up close. Now that doesn't mean you don't take shots at them, but that means that you need to give them breathing room so that they have time for you to get more shots into them. That's usually my first go-to is just if you're not a Jedi, give them breath. So
what counts as breathing room then for you?
That is a great question. So that comes into a harder discussion, but that's more of a learning range bands. And I think Tyler would probably confirm with me that this is the biggest difference between really seasoned players and good players who've just been not quite as seasoned. Is if you can eyeball range bands, that's a huge skill. Being able to look at a table and say, hey, that's 12 inches, that's range 2. I know that without burst of speed, a force user can just barely move and get almost within charge range, within range 2. So if I'm at range 2 of a force user, they're probably most likely are going to be able to charge me. So I need to be able to at least be at range 3 if I'm not going to be charged, or be able to just skirt them at like 2.5 or whatever it would be. So, and you've got to remember that they might have force push as well. So that's going to add some extra range as well.
Yeah, I've been a little more lenient on my range bans with Jedi specifically, just because I play so many damn Magna Guards, and so I'm kind of like, all right, charge me, whatever.
Do you think you
But
will
yeah,
die?
I think Jedi specifically, you just have to stay out of their band to get engaged. Really, like as long as they bury themselves, they are 10 times safer than what they would be if they didn't bury themselves. Inside your lines, I should say. So it's just being aware of like if they are engaged, their gameplay goes up way more, and my counterplay goes way down. So
Yeah.
just keeping that in mind, I think the longer they don't engage, the longer the Jedi's just doing nothing and not attacking and not getting their points worth, like we were kind of talking about in the beginning, and B, I don't know, the longer that they have to just wait and messes up their game plan.
Yep. And that's a
Right.
good point too. Like you having Magna Guards, like that's understanding your list. And even though Magna Guard is not technically a lightsaber unit, like the fact that they have immune pierce and melee, the fact that they've got a lot of bodies, they've got a red save, they get free tokens, they're going to be able to really counter force users coming in. So that's just a key to know the role of your units.
Yeah, and bringing that up is actually kind of a good point, and transitioning into like if you're playing like a gun line specifically or some other type of list, knowing how your counterplay works. Do you need to be kiting out of engagement? Or are you okay letting them engage? Honestly, most of the time, even when I'm not really playing Magna Guards, it's actually sometimes okay if they engage my B1s, because 9 out of 10 times I'm playing against a Jedi. Like, good examples, Anakin. Anakin throws 5 red dice. If he has tenacity, sometimes he'll have 6, but 5 red dice. If I have a 7-man B1 unit, he cannot kill that 7-man B1 unit. It'll take him at minimum 2 turns to kill a 7-man B1. And so it's like just knowing, like, if he has to attack these B1s twice in order to kill him, that is more than valuable enough from my eyes to just let him sit there in engagement. And that's fine by me. Now, obviously, there's other things like he could use force push in certain ways and kind of mess up my move toward an objective or something like that. But I don't know. It doesn't seem like it's getting his value out at that point.
Yeah, and that's a good callback to the threat evaluation. Is the 160 point Anakin spending 2 turns to whack through the 50 point B1? That's great for you. That's a good trade.
54.
Yeah.
Sorry, 56.
Listen, math is your wheelhouse.
I'm just saying. I'm just going to keep you honest. It's just, yeah. So when you're doing the threat evaluation math, how much does it change if you have a force user of your own? Like, when does it become? I guess the easier way to look at it is like, when does it become apparent that they have to be the one to dive into you versus you have to dive into them? Like, when is like, how do you differentiate that?
Well, I mean, for me, it at least comes down to what I need that Jedi or whatever to do. Like, if you look at Operative Luke versus Yoda, I think that's a good example of somebody who needs to attack to get their points worth. Or if you're like playing key positions with Yoda, you cannot make a single attack all game, and Yoda can still make all 200 points up at the end of the game by just double force pushing off a point and, doing other shenanigans, right? And it's kind of like, Operative Luke, like, you still have force push, you still have objective play in that sense, but I mean, he has disengaged. Like, you need to get him in the lines, cutting things up, and then leaving, units on 1 or 2 health so that your other units can finish him off.
Yeah, I do think, again, I think that also calls back to what is your force user's role. Like you said, like Yoda doesn't really ever need to have to charge just because of the way he's built, the way he's composited. He's a giant control-y support piece, whereas Operative Luke wants to literally destroy the entire barge. Like, he wants to Return of the Jedi, and he wants to kill everyone that's on it. And he has to do that to get his points back. So I think that kind of plays a little bit of a role in it. With me, I mean, I play Rebels, so my options are Sabine, or not Sabine, Ahsoka and Luke. And I think both of them pretty much always want to engage last. They want to be the one um, to control the fight, meaning that they want to control how many times you're going to have people swing back on them. So to me, whenever I'm playing a Jedi with Rebels, I always want to be able to go into that Force user fight and not have to be pushed around and not have to have the return swing.
Yeah, that's pretty fair. One other thing that I'm thinking about, personally, is I think a lot of your entire list matters a lot for when you're evaluating what you need to do with the Jedi, because it's like
Mm,
there's like some that are like, for example, Vader with a bunch of T-21 storms. Vader doesn't really have to care if his gun line is running at peak efficiency because he can solo game by himself. So, and his all he needs is like one shot from each of the storms. Whereas, like if I'm playing like a Yodame ball, you need those P1s kind of like up and kicking and everything. So that's kind of like a big part of it too. I think. Um, but like evaluating like what has to protect what in your list versus what it has to be protected from also is kind of important conversation there. Um, but yeah, I don't know if there's anything else for Jedi versus Jedi. Um, but I think the last one that's kind of important ones to think about and talk about is going against bounty hunters. Because I
mm,
think that very much changes how you play characters and like what the threat to those characters becomes. Um, so how much does, let's say like I am going against the good old classic Empire double bounty list of like Boba, IG-88, and like a gun line. How much does it change how you play your heroes, be it Jedi or not? Does that become like more about just measuring range bands or what?
Yeah,
um,
for me, it's you obviously have to look at the pieces that the bounty pieces that you have. In terms of them just fighting your gun line, it's not super super relevant. I mean, obviously they're very efficient at shooting and things like that and killing bodies, but um, the threat of bounty always has to be prevalent, and you have to know like if you have like a Krennic or something that you usually play aggressive with or something for whatever reason. Like you have to know maybe this game you're gonna hide behind a wall and you're not gonna feel too bad about it. Um, just because you can't just gift somebody a victory point like that, especially with how the game is in its current state and how low scoring it is.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, if you have a more aggressive piece, like say a Jedi, or just a more aggressive, lower cost, that may be a bounty hunter yourself or something like that. The math gets way way different because sometimes you'd actually be okay with, let's say Sabine going in and doing her explosions, maybe double shooting, doing explosions, just completely causing havoc, and just kind of being okay with that's the trade you're getting. She's explosioning on everybody, and she's gonna die in return, and like so be it. Well, if they get a victory point out of that, it's kind of like, well, why would I do that then? It's not worth it at all.
yeah,
Um,
that's a tough trade.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, you'd have to have
Yeah,
a very, very good reason to be doing that. So,
yeah.
um,
Well, the reason is fun, right? Because you get to blow up a bunch of units. That sounds like a great trade to me. I don't know about you.
Yeah,
Um,
I do think there's definitely a for me the big thing is it's an evaluation of who is my bounty hunter. And I think this has come down to a point of like knowing how efficient certain bounty hunters are collecting bounties based on the character. Like Bosk is going to be really great at picking off anything with white saves. Like you just got to be extremely careful if you've got a range 4 boss coming at your officer. You get him out there at any point and he could one shot him and now he's got a victory point. Whereas if you've got a, operative Vader or you've got a Dooku, you're a little bit beefier. You're not nearly as scared. You're still somewhat like you still want to be cautious, but you're not nearly as scared of a boss as you would be an officer. Whereas I feel like if I've got a Ahsoka, I'm going to be way more cautious around an Empire Boba Fett. I don't know when maybe that whipcord's coming out. Maybe I'm going to get tied up when I don't want to. So I think it really comes into who is my bounty hunter and how do I need to be cagey around them. How vulnerable are my pieces? Like you said, like Sabine going in for an explosion. I really don't want to do that if they have an IG-88. Because if he plays that one pip and I can't spend green tokens, she could very much be a sitting duck.
Yeah. All right. I think, okay, so let's say we screwed up, right? And our Sabine dies to bounty and it ends up costing us the game. All right. So let's say we're going to now go ahead and take some post game reflections and figure out how to improve our gameplay, right? Because we're masters at segues and we're gonna call them out. And I'm gonna toot my own horn there.
Yeah. In there.
So number one thing, what? So actually, like the first thing to think about is how long after a game do you actually like think about like post reflection? Because like I don't think you can really reflect on a game like immediately after you lose, because like it's a 3 hour game. It is going to be a little bit emotional. It's either going to you're either going to be really happy or really bad, or sorry, not bad, sad, based off whether you win or lose, because it is 3 hour game. So like, do you think about it like right away after a game, or do you give it like a couple minutes, or like what? Like how long should you think about like for you guys?
I think that depends on who you are. Tyler, I'll let you kick that off.
I'll start with the story. So I lost my game
Need
to
some popcorn.
I think his nickname is Anatrocho, whatever. His name, he's from Team France in WTC, right? And there was basically I had a lying in wait turn. I was gonna try to kill a bus before one of his Black Suns get out. I shoot with Bosk. When the bus is on 4 wounds, I get all 5 crits. He saves 3 of 5. Bus lives. Black Suns get out. Absolutely nuke this one Magna Guard I had with 2 aims and a face-up token. Okay? That pretty much cost me the game because I completely lost a Magna Guard for free. I couldn't heal it at that point. It was the end of the round. I think about 56 hours after this game happened, we're on the plane. We're on our way back to the States, and I was sitting next to Brian on the plane, and I said, I could have won that game, Brian. And he's like, what are you talking about? He thought I was probably sleep talking or something. And I was like, what? I could have won the game, Brian. I totally had it. And he's like, okay, well, like, what do you mean? Like, how could you have played that different? Like, he saved 3 of 5 on a Bosk shot. Like if he had failed one more save, like the bus dies, that Magna Guard double moves charges into the Black Sun that lose a wound, and like you're way help on attrition, and it's going into round 2, and you're feeling great. And I was like, I could have just moved and stood by with the Magna Guards. He couldn't have blown up anything. And it was like, Brian sitting there like, wow, you're absolutely right. He's like, you absolutely
only range 2.
And it took me about 56 hours to figure out, just thinking about that game, like, I totally could have done a different play. I absolute credit to him. But at the same time, he made a 3 out of 5 save on a bus, and I left it up to the dice when I could have totally made a play that had no dice dependency whatsoever. That was totally safe. And I didn't do that. And it probably cost me the game. And I was like, it didn't click in my head for 2.5 days later. And sometimes it's like that. Sometimes you need to just step away from the game and maybe just in your head replay, I went through these steps, but this is what happened. Like, what could I have done to stop that? And sometimes it doesn't come right away. Sometimes it comes much, much later. Sometimes it's very, very obvious. And chatting with your opponent, sometimes your opponent, not in a sort of condescending way, in a helpful way, will be like, yeah, I think you could have done this and put me in a much worse spot, or I think you could have done X, Y, and Z, and I couldn't have responded with ABC. So it just depends, but sometimes you really do have to kind of simmer on it a little bit. That's what I'm getting at. You can't get all the information you want right after the game.
I would say for people that are way less obsessed with Legion, enough to not fly out to like Spain and stuff like that, it's probably best for me personally. Like my metric is about 15 to 30 minutes after a game. If you want to like reflect on it and like think about it and kind of like improve on it, it's probably the best time to start because that's when it's still fresh enough in your mind that you'll remember it. But like you could also potentially just think about it constantly nonstop for 56 hours. That is also an option, as Tyler has.
I mean,
So-
I'm not going to leave Tyler alone in that boat. I've been in that boat before.
Oh, I have to. Don't
Like,
worry.
especially depending on who I play and who I lose to, like, makes it that much more sour.
I remember after Gen Con this past year, I had lost to Izzy, round 5. This is another one we can come back to in a little bit, that Gen Con tournament, because there's a lot to talk about with dice for that one.
There's a yeah.
But it was like top 8 game. I was playing against Izzy, and I think I thought about that game for like a week afterwards, like just straight, because like I was very salty with myself. So yeah, so like it's totally reasonable to think about it for more than like a little bit of time, but like at the same time you should probably start like 15 to 30 minutes afterwards. But on the topic of dice, how do you determine when a game comes down to dice and when a game comes down to misplays? Because like I feel like there's a lot of times that people chalk something up to dice, saying like, yeah, I just rolled dice bad. Whereas like majority of the time they could have made a different kind of play, right? So when is it dice and when is it not?
It's never dice.
It's never dice.
It is never dice.
Yeah.
I will be the first to tell you this right now. Never, ever blame your dice. And I'm not saying this
We
because...
all do it.
No, we
but
absolutely all do
I agree.
it. And the reason I say this is because it's for multiple reasons. One, if you're blaming your dice, you're not truly acknowledging that there were better plays to be made. And trust me, there are games that are decided on a single or 2 or 3 dice rolls. And like if they just go the opposite way, that completely flips the game or just completely puts you behind, there's nothing you can do about it. But the other reason I say don't blame dice is because it just does not credit your opponent with the situation they may have put you in. It doesn't feel good being like, yeah, wow, you played a great game, and then they say, yeah, well, I just couldn't roll saves for shit. And it's like,
yeah,
okay, well, like as an opponent, I don't know how to respond to that. Or
right.
And I never want to put somebody in that situation, so I don't know.
That's when you double
I
down.
hands down.
Like, I was like, no, you got to double down on that and just kind of like rub it in a little bit. You'd be like, yeah, you can't roll dice, suck it.
Can't play either.
Yeah, can't play either. Can't do nothing.
I will hands
don't actually
down.
Do that. Just for clarity, please don't actually do that.
Don't
you
do
didn't
that.
hear that from us. You didn't hear that. If you do it, you didn't hear it from us.
Yeah, we will disown Adam for that one.
Hey,
just kidding, Adam. But yeah, I hands down agree with that because it never feels good for your opponent. It doesn't set a good pace for the Legion community, and it just doesn't. It doesn't leave your opponent walking away feeling like they accomplished something. It actually just takes it and rubs some dirt in it, and like that's not fun for them. Like speaking of Gen Con, Adam and I had to face day 2, round 1 at Gen Con this past year, and like opening turn. I think I had Sabine in heavy cover with a dodge.
No, Sabine had moved up because it was the
2 pips, so they got extra movements or something.
Yeah, so
Sabine had moved up.
I shot her with I believe it was a vet squad, and fire sported with it. It might not have even fire sported. No, it was fire sported. It was either the vet squad or the FD. I don't remember which, but I had pushed.
Yeah.
Through to after dodges, after cover, I pushed through. I believe it was 5. No, It was 6. It was either 5 or 6. One of the 2.
Yep.
No pierce.
And I think she blocked 2.
Yep.
2 opening shot. So opening. I mean, this is like tail end of round 1. She's got 4 wounds on her out of the gate, and so at that point, like I've got salt because Adam and I know each other. We play a lot, and so it's Adam, and so I'm kind of like, crap. And then of course next turn, I think my Ahsoka ended up taking like 3 more wounds, and so like by turn 2, I've got 2 150, 200 point heroes at half health. I haven't put a scratch on them. And so there was a lot of things that I could have done to change those dynamics. Now, granted, there were some dice involved, obviously. And I know Adam, so I don't want to end the game and just be a jerk. But even then, I had to kind of be like, all right, like, I'm frustrated. I would love to blame the dice. I would love to just be frustrated in this moment because they didn't swing my way. But I also have to acknowledge that Adam played really hard. He got to day 2, just like I did. He outplayed me. He had a way longer gun line. He got good shots. And so I have to acknowledge that. Yeah. And I have to basically say, okay, great game, Adam. And we even talked about it. We talked a little bit about dice, but we didn't also come in and say, oh man, your dice were just so hot. And even at one point I did say, Adam, I'm sorry. I've talked a little bit too much about dice. Let's move on from that. So
I think it's also there's times to talk. There is times to talk about dice in your reflection. You shouldn't blame it, like as Tyler said earlier. But there are very much times to talk about dice because it's kind of a good time to look at your like risk versus reward of a certain play. Like you can look at like another example. This is my favorite example because it keeps beating up on Matt Sabine. Matt had moved forward at a local tournament we were playing at. Round 3, we were both 2-0. He had moved his Ahsoka or Sabine up to throw an explosions into my gun line. And so she was done. I had played Reckless Diversion with Han and fire supported him with a Mark II. And I shot Sabine. I pushed 5 through cover, or after the dodge and everything, and he took 5 wounds. And Sabine died, got 1 shot by 6 dice.
Yep.
So great. It's kind of like that situation where it's like, well, I could have played this differently, but like, there's also is like a 1% chance of this happening.
Right. The other caveat to that is also, I mean, in that game as an example, dice were horrible for that 1 shot, but I also ended up like keeping my head in it and pulling back and winning. And so we could, it's one of those where how do you when the dice don't go, when the dice don't go your way, how do you still show up to pivot your games? And I think that's the better conversation around dice is how do you not be reliant on just dice? If you're playing a range 4 gun line, or if you're playing explosions, or if the dice don't show up for that one big play, how do you pivot and continue moving forward?
Yeah, I think it's just a really tough thing. That's why I play droids, because I'm gonna roll blanks, and I'm just gonna accept it. And the only variance I can get is I roll more blocks.
Wait, yeah, Tyler, I think we're just gonna get you a dice bucket to carry around for your B1s. Just,
I'm gonna say this. The last 2 games of Legion I've played, I played a pickup game here locally. And then it was the round 6 of WTC. One of my B1 E5S shots has maxed out in both games. 8 out of 8.
When you just no one checked your dice? No one checked your dice?
They were aim shoots. Let me just add that.
Oh, wow. You rerolled 2 white dice and still hit full boats. Wow.
The second time it happened, I got 7 out of 8 at the beginning, and I missed the red.
Oof.
So
it's that kind of reroll. Oh, I see. I
mean, I told my opponents that was the average, so they believe it.
Okay, so if it's the average, it makes sense. Yeah, let me just dice it off the table really quick with my averages. But yeah, jeez,
Adam's got some serious salt tonight. We might have to.
I mean, like I was also like, there's like other times that like I was thinking about that. Like I didn't really want to drag out the memories from Nova when it was like this is my best example of like bad dice games because like we're just telling stories all for like the next like 15 minutes, I guess. Round 4 of Nova. this year I was playing like a range 4 gun line. There was like 2 FDs, 2 Mandos with rockets, Boba Fett, a bunch of Fets with the potato cannons, like a range 4 gun line. And I was playing against a Yoda Anakin list. Um, and the table we pulled was this open, like the center of this map was extremely freaking open. Like I could shoot him in like the 3 turns it took him to cross it to attack me, basically. Um, and we pulled hostage. So and I was higher points, so he had to come to me. Um, and I did spend these 3 turns shooting these Jedi. Don't get me wrong. And we went back through it. And I think I forced him to make 80 or 90 saves, I think, when we went back through it. And he took a grand total of 5 wounds. But so like like I'm a little salty at the time and everything. Like that's like what 90% save rate, whatever. I was really fuming. But at the same time, because we were playing hostage, I had made a mistake that game in that my hostage was walking around the opposite side of the building that the rest of my gun line was on. So because he was able to survive, I didn't think he was going to survive, but because I was making that assumption, my hostage ended up walking away from my gun line and his protection. And so like that's like one of the things for an example of like what you could have done differently, and it's never dice. If that Mark II with the hostage walks into my gun line, or towards my gun line, those Jedi will die eventually, right? Because like you can't roll 90% paint all the time.
And you've got other guys to pick them up.
Yeah, it's like I got other guys to pick it up, but like he was able to just grab my hostage and run away, and I lost the game because of that. So that's like, yeah, like dice are supposed to go one way or another, but like just really, really think about like what you could have done differently.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great example because every game is a learning experience, and you have to have some sort of takeaway after every game. Because Legion, I mean, you just cannot get enough games in to really, really be like, oh, I've played this matchup, 400 times. Like, no, you might have seen it once or twice, and it might have tricks and stuff that weren't utilized the first time or two that you played it, or it might have the player might play it completely differently, or some aspect like that. I mean, you just have to learn every single game you play. I mean, like Adam gave an example where his opponent's dice were just ridiculous, and I gave an example right before that of like my dice being ridiculous. But I cannot go into a game being like, well, this game another B1's gonna max out and go 8 for 8. Like, no, that's not gonna happen.
Yeah.
And if it does happen, I mean, I need to go see a doctor or something.
You're doing something weird.
I don't know if it's weird. I need to like cut off my hand and sell it to like some 40K.
He's got that magnetic touch.
Yeah, I guess. But like I'm never gonna go into my next game going, well, this is what I'm expecting, because I obviously know that is not normal. And that's an outlier, and I just have to take away the more average information that was given to me from the game.
Yeah, playing around averages is always your best bet, just because that's the easiest way to get kind of like what you should expect, obviously, because that's what an average is. Kind of crazy thought, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's also like if you've got a bad dice game or a good dice game, it's always important to make sure your opponent understands that if you're salty, you're not salty at them. Kind of like that's just like a good game etiquette and everything. But because like after that Nova game, I was like, I had to spend like 15 minutes. Like I was fuming. It was not pretty. I was very angry. And my opponent felt really bad because it was like, yeah, like we both acknowledged the fact that I should have won that game and that I should have tabled him. But it's also like really important for me in that time to make my opponent understand that like I wasn't mad at him. I was just mad at the game. That like he did what he was supposed to do, and it just so happened that the dice gave him a massive advantage in it because like I made mistakes too, even with good dice. So it's like it's really important. Just don't get mad at your opponents for stuff like that. That's kind of like my number one thing.
It's a game.
It's a game. We are grown
We're here
people.
to have fun.
We are grown men and women sitting here pushing around miniature pieces of plastic about a make-believe galaxy that's very far away with shooting lasers and having laser swords at people.
Hey, it's not make-believe. It's just far away.
It is very far away. You're
That's right.
I apologize.
A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away.
I'm sure that there is actually Star Wars out there somewhere, and I would love to go find it. Like, if I could be an astronaut and go live in Star Wars, I would. It would be great. Um,
Hey, they won't reach our universe or our galaxy without a Purgle, apparently, via the Ahsoka show, I guess. So,
That's right. Purgils,
Purgill.
space whales.
mm,
That's right.
let's just go find one then. That sounds like a great time. Um, yeah. I don't know where to go from here.
Well, we could talk
Wow.
about like what any hobby stuff we're doing, or you know.
Ooh,
Oh, that's okay. There's one thing I was thinking about with hopping, right? Because like my bus here, I got a camera right here and I got a picture of it. My bus is ugly. If you can see like if you're looking at a video, it's like very obvious that like I painted it with a brush and it is a large surface. And it does
mm,
not look good. So my question to you guys is, what do you go about for painting your like large vehicles and stuff? Be it an AT, ST, an AT, a Saber tank, a bus, that kind of thing. What are like because I think that's the thing that like everyone talks about
yeah,
painting miniatures, but nobody talks about painting like the big stuff. And I feel like the big stuff is
big
the
stuff's
hardest
hard.
stuff to paint.
Yep. So I mean, the big thing is I know a lot of hobbyists use airbrushes. So that's the easiest way. Is an airbrush is going to cover a bigger surface a lot easier. But if you're like me and you hate tinkering with airbrushes, you don't have an airbrush, um, you can I would say choose whatever you want kind of your base color to be. Buy a rattle can. Cover it to start with a rattle can, and essentially the same way you would paint a miniature. You kind of want to start with the way, or at least the way that I've always been traditionally taught to paint miniatures, is you start with the layers that are the most deepest to the miniature. So you want to start with whether that's the skin tone, then you go to the t-shirt they're wearing, then you go to the coat, and then you go to the goggles or the accessories, and so you kind of build up. The same thing for your vehicle. So you want to start with your base colors. You want to prime it in a gray or prime it in a tan, whatever you're trying to do. And then you can go back and you can do details. Like I've seen some amazing weathering that people have done just with like makeup sponges. Those are really great. You can get really deep, fine details on like edges of panels and things like that. And so you can kind of start building those layers up. But I would say just get a rattle can, start there, and then kind of figure out how you want to build details up.
All right, now that Matt has talked you off the airbrush cliff, I'm gonna talk you back on it.
Yeah.
So
Send you
I
off cliff.
I think I spent it was via Amazon. I think I spent about $120 on an airbrush and mini compressor, and it was actually three airbrush like heads or whatever, and a mini compressor combo. I spent about $20 on two bottles of Vallejo primer. One was black and one was a light gray. And this is probably about 12 to 18 months ago when I bought all this.
Mm.
I have not run out of primer from those two bottles. If I had gone and bought rattle cans for, like good rattle cans through like Games Workshop or any of the other companies that are $25 a rattle can, I would have
Oh,
spent
it's so much more expensive.
as much money on these freaking rattle cans than I have currently at this point spending about 100, let's say $170 on these two bottles of primer and the entire airbrush setup. And I swear it is so much easier. You get so much better priming. It's so much more efficient because, you have to think like shooting a rattle can is like kind of shooting like a shotgun at
Yep.
at a
100%.
needle almost, because your spray area is like this and your miniature is like this, and there's so much wasted paint. And some of those rattle can primers are really really good. So I'm not going to try to poo-poo them too much. But an airbrush in the long term, if you're going to continue doing mini games, and I know you play mini games, Adam, go buy an airbrush. They're
I was like,
so
I
nice.
was about to say, you've
Yeah,
just given me my next excuse for why I haven't painted the
they
hundred of
are.
miniatures I'm staring
Don't
at
get me
right now.
wrong. They are a great investment. I think those that can maintain them and use them and learn them are awesome. So I'm not dinging them in any way. It's more of a personal preference. Like my painting time with three children at home is usually limited to like 2 hours in the evening. So by the time I set up, clean, or set up, load it, use it, change the colors, clean it, do all of that. My painting time just gets a little bit taken away for details, and so rattle cans are easier for me. And I think
Absolutely.
that's mostly just a personal preference.
So
Yeah,
to
let me
my
add, never use your airbrush like good expensive primer or any paint on terrain. Go to Walmart and buy like a $4 or $5 can of whatever gray you want. At this point it
Yep.
doesn't matter, because actually those paints are so much better for terrain, because terrain you're gonna have to like keep it boxed up, and you're gonna rough it up a little bit more than you would your miniatures, and so that paint will
Absolutely.
actually protect it a lot better than any sort of specialty miniature paint or whatever you could find. So for that
Yep.
stuff, 100% go rattle cans, and don't go GW or anything like that. Go Walmart or go
Rust-Oleum, baby.
yes, Rust-Oleum, absolutely.
Yep. The stuff that's built for literally like model cars and stuff. I mean, Rust-Oleum is going to be great for that.
Absolutely.
This was a great 5-minute conversation. Now I have an excuse to not have kids, so I can keep painting my stuff, and I have an excuse to not paint my stuff because I don't have an airbrush anymore.
So
All right, we're
caveat
doing
to
great.
that, you know, I feel like I'm to the point now where I'm regularly. I've got my middle, my only boy, loves coming with me on Monday nights to play Legion, and so like Monday he was with me, and so he was like standing on a chair at the table watching me play Legion, and he was like trying to figure out where all the characters were and watching all of the Wookiees, and so, you know, super interested in this game. And on the way home he's like, so when I get older you can buy me an army? I was like, yeah buddy, I'll buy you an army and you can paint it. And he's like, yeah. So, you know,
Okay. All right,
it's great
so,
too.
Do we have anywhere else we want to go before Matt makes me want children more? Anything else?
It's got to be a weird podcast for the night, but that's all right.
It's going great. It's just like,
Adam,
yeah.
how's life?
It's going great. We're finally at the point where it's like, you know, like it's actually old enough. I'm old enough for it to be feasible, and like I don't know if they want it or not, but like it would make my girlfriend happy. So like there's that. That sounded really bad. Don't take that the way it sounded. But anyway, before I dig myself a hole to China, I'm gonna leave us off with a little bit of fun, probably related life advice. Never put your hand where you wouldn't put your willy.